Welcome, gamers, to Basement Arcade Pause Me, the show where we just hit pause on the game, sit back, relax, and just chill. I am your host, Ben Magnet. I'm once again, unfortunately, not joined by my other bros from the FakeNerd podcast, but that's okay because once again, I am not alone. I am joined by this awesome dude who wrote this thing, Retro Gaming, a bite-sized history of video games. Ladies and gentlemen, all the way from the beautiful United Kingdom, welcome to the show, Mike Diver. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thanks, Ben. I say beautiful. I mean, it did get a bit sunny this afternoon, I guess, but
that's good.
But yeah, spring is struggling to make itself known here, but we'll get there in the end. But no, thanks for having me. It's nice to speak to someone about that book that you just mentioned. Because that was the thing I did.
Yeah, it is a thing I did, and to be perfectly honest, you are essentially you writing this book is essentially my dream job. Because a while ago, I was in a job interview for a retro video game console clone company for a sales position, and we just started talking about retro games and podcasting and everything. And I told him, and I was just like spewing all this knowledge about retro games. And the guy interviewing me says, "Dang, you should write a book." I'm like, "I want to. I really want to." I mean, you already did it.
I did it, but it's a big enough market, Ben. I think it can take a few more books on old games, and there's always a conveyor belt of new people who want to know about this stuff. Definitely.
Yeah, and I did not know this book existed, so I want to tell you really quick how I found your book. I was at a Barnes and Noble, just in the video game section. The video game section of Barnes & Noble, for some reason, is like a magical place because I found so many great books there. I found Console Wars by Blake Harris there, which is that's a super thick, that's like super meaty, but it's got a lot of great information there. I have The Game Console by Evan Amos, which my girlfriend found and said, like, hey, you should probably use this because I write freelance for a video game website. And then I got the Super Mario Encyclopedia, and I'm just looking down, and on the bottom shelf, there's this little book that says Retro Gaming. I'm like, what's this? And I pull it out, and I flip through it. I'm like, oh, this is like, oh, bite-sized history. I get the joke. It is. And I'm just looking at it.
Yep.
I'm looking at it.
Wouldn't be British without a pun.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at this. I'm like, you know what? I get a discount at Barnes & Noble. I'm going to pick this up. Why not? So I picked it up. And then that same night, I started reading it. I'm like, this is actually really good. Because it's a bite-sized history of video games, because nowadays video game history is becoming, I love it because it's coming more and more mainstream. So I want to ask you, how did this book, what was, like, excuse my pun, what was the genesis of this project? How did you think, you know what, I'm gonna write a book about this?
It's a surprisingly apt pun, because what happened was I'd written 2 books previous, I've worked in and around the games media for quite a long time, for about 10, 11 years or so. And I'd written 2 previous books that came out in 2016. There was one on indie games, which did, so-so, kind of riding that zeitgeist a little bit. No Man's Sky was still not out, so that was a really big deal. And one with esports with a company called Fnatic that came out the same year. So I'd done 2. And I kind of had that itch, a bit like what you're talking about. I want to do this thing. And the Mega Drive, the Genesis 30th anniversary was coming up. So I was just pitching around some ideas for, like, a Mega Drive book or something around the Mega Drive. Maybe something small, maybe something pocket size, like a little companion, because the Mega Drive Mini was on its way as well, or the Genesis Mini, I suppose, in North America.
You're more welcome to just stick with the European names, because it's because while I was reading it, I actually realized that this book came from the UK, because the barcode that's on the actual book itself just has the British pound price for it. Normally, when books are published multinationally, there's like the price of the American price, the Canadian price, and then the UK. They just like slapped their own barcode over. I'm like, oh, and then but as I was reading it, I was like, okay, cool. He's talking about. Because I really like how you mentioned both the Sega Mega Drive and the Genesis, because for some reason here in North America, Sega was like, let's call it the Genesis, let's not call it the Mega Drive.
Yeah, there was some kind of existing product on the market, so the story goes. So they changed it. But I mean, Japanese products or European products going to America has a bit of a history in gaming for, like, name changes or design changes. Of course, Famicom becoming the NES, and what happened to the Super Nintendo over there. But yeah, like for this book, you know, what happened was that Mega Drive pitch basically kind of got broadened out a little bit. I ended up speaking to a couple of publishers, and the one who published my indie games book was like, you know, would you just do us like, you know, kind of a retro games book, like, you know, take the Mega Drive stuff, that's great, but, you know, can you know, kind of cover from, well, they kind of asked me like, when does it start and when does retro finish? So that was the hardest point, like, where does retro finish?
Yeah.
And the thinking there was like, I mean, I actually wanted to go up to PS3 and Xbox 360.
Oh, because funny enough, actually, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Because in your book, the last like full chapter where you talk about consoles and games is the 6th generation, which is the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and the Nintendo GameCube. Because I was going to ask you personally, where do you think retro ends? Because I think a game I want to say, like, for me, retro gaming is like the 6th generation. That's like the newest, air quotes, the newest age of retro games, whereas the PS3, that's still technically modern. That's my thinking. I want to know your opinion about that.
Yeah, I mean, we're only just getting to the point now where, you know, Sony is closing the PS3 store, you know, to a lot of, you know, controversy there, because a lot of games are going to get lost. But I guess I kind of went up to there because after that point, you get the 360 and the PS3 with HD, you know, HD graphics coming into things. The way those consoles, the way the biggest games on those consoles generally played wasn't that different from the PS2 and the original Xbox. You know, your kind of first-person shooters were well established. Your kind of third-person action adventure games had, of course, been set up by things like Tomb Raider. So the actual genres of games hadn't really changed. So I guess I went up to that point, the GameCube, the Xbox, the PS2, to get that in, you know, 3D GTA, what Halo did for first-person shooters on console. I wanted to get up to that point. But then you look at it from a passage of time perspective, and you think, well, the 360 was 2005, right? So Gears of War is 2005. That's 16 years now. You know, is that retro yet? You know, there's going to be people playing on their PS5s and Series X's now. They're like 20 years old or something. You know, they never played those games when they were kids. Well, at least they shouldn't have. You know, they shouldn't have been playing Gears of War at 5 years old. So yeah, we went up to there for the book, and it was only a small bit as well, because I wanted, you know, I'm very aware that for a lot of people, it's like retro is NES, SNES, you know, maybe through the first generation PlayStation, but even PS2s maybe pushing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a little discussion with the publisher about that. I was like, I want to put the PS3 in, and they're like, we don't think you should. And I was like, okay, I'll leave it out. I'll save it for the sequel.
Okay. Because I was because while I was going through it, I kind of agree with your publisher, because I feel the PlayStation 3, I mean, yes, the news did just come out a few days ago. Whenever this comes out, we're recording like the day before Easter. The news that that Sony is officially closing the PS3 store for the PlayStation Portable and the PS Vita. You won't be able to buy anything online anymore. That is a huge blow to owners of the system. They're closing the store down in March, but I still feel like as cool as the PS3 eventually became, because when it first came out, it was abysmal. But I still feel like that's still technically retro. Yes, the PS5 is here, but the PS3 is still like just so crisp and clean. Whereas if you compare a PS3 to a PS2, it's like PS2 retro, PS3 modern.
Yeah, it's that HD jump, and just the, you know, I think quite genuinely, games as a medium, I suppose, games in terms of what you do in that moment to moment play, they haven't really changed a great deal since the PS2 Xbox era. You know, those were the years where we, like I said before, you know, we founded the most popular genres right now. I know VR has kind of built a semi-head of steam through, you know, what Valve's done with Half-Life last year, and what PlayStation thinks it wants to keep doing, you know, to mix success. But you know, this new generation, what's it really offering? It's offering faster loading. I mean, things are a little bit shiny if you've got a TV to support it, but a lot of people don't have fancy TVs to support it. So I think that switch, I mean, it wasn't as dramatic as, God, I'm going to get into bits. You know, it wasn't as dramatic as that 16 to 32-bit shift where you suddenly went, oh my God, like, you know, you're playing Wipeout, you're playing Tomb Raider, Destruction Derby, games like this. You're thinking, this, you know, games will never look as good as this. I found myself on a Twitter discussion the other day. We were talking about Mario 64, because some people have obviously only just played Super Mario 64 because of the now retired 3D All Stars collection that's on the Switch.
That's me. I had it. I always get into this. I'm not in this fight, but I always have to defend myself because when I was a kid and I did have an N64 when I was younger, I wanted an N64 only for Pokemon Stadium.
That's fair enough.
For Pokemon Stadium, Mario Kart, and Smash Bros. I was when Mario Kart 3D came out, or when Mario All-Stars 3D All-Stars came out, I got it, and I think I'm like over 100 stars in Mario 64. The game is amazing.
Right. So you're still finding it amazing because that's what it was. A friend of mine who works at Square Enix. Actually, he posted like this is still amazing now. I can't imagine what it was like at the time. And my response to that was very much like it was magic. It was like, how was it you had Super Mario World, right? You had Super Mario World, and we had Super Mario All Stars on the SNES, and of course Yoshi's Island, which is a beautiful game even now. But then Mario 64 was just like, wow, that is like games will never look this good. And I don't think anything that's happened in the last few generations has been quite as seismic as that shift to successful 3D. Because obviously we had some 3D games before. I always think of Hard Driving, this like driving sim game. It's all like really hard, really bad polygons, really terrible. Like things like Virtua Racing are great, but yeah, there was some bad 3D games, and of course, Star Fox as well was fantastic on the SNES. So there were people that were doing stuff. There's a great story behind Star Fox actually, if you ever dig into that. I don't think I do in the book, but that was basically like kind of pioneered like how that game ran by like just these young kids from Britain. It's a fantastic story. You can go look it up in your free time.
Star Fox, because I never played my first introduction to Star Fox was like a lot of kids introduction was through Star Fox 64 on the N64, which yes, it's an on the rail shooter. Just playing that game with all those aerial dogfights, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it wasn't until I was an adult when I realized that came out before, because I thought Star Fox 64, that was an N64 original. That's why I thought, I was like, this is the very first Star Fox game. Nope. We had Star Fox and Star Fox 2 on the Super Nintendo, but Star Fox 2 never came out in the United States until the SNES Mini came out. So I will not lie, as I am a very big proponent of I can sit down and play older retro games. It's the pixel art does not bother me at all. Even the cruder 3D polygons of the PlayStation 2 don't bother me at all. But when I did try my hand at Star Fox for the SNES, it is a little hard to look at.
It's hard. It's hard to read. Yeah, it is hard to read. Like you can pretty much get through that first stage, the planet stage, and then I always found when you were out in space and there was the kind of spinning shapes in front of you, I was like, I couldn't quite, even at the time, I found it hard to plot exactly where I was in relation to that massive moving solid object that was about to wipe me out. But it's interesting what you say there about thinking that a game was this game that I've just discovered, this must be where it begins, because of course that's the case with anyone going back a few years. If you had a SNES and Super Mario World, you got your SNES Super Mario World, you're like, this is amazing. Then you find out there's more Super Mario, and you're like, those games mostly aren't quite as good as this one. And when I was playing Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt on the little combi cart on the NES, in the very, very, very early 90s, like it had been out for a few years, but it would have been around about then. Like I had no idea then that there'd been a Mario Brothers arcade game. Like I didn't know Nintendo at that time had the history that Nintendo did. Like, digging into the history of Nintendo is one of the most fun trips, you'll ever take when you're finding out about this stuff, from, the fact that it was founded in the 19th century through its questionable chain of love hotels right through to where we are today, and the Switch being a success story, which sits outside of like what is conventional in games right now. It's not the PS4, PS5, it's not the Xbox, One or Series X. It's its own thing again, like Nintendo doing its own thing again, which either tends to like soar away and become incredibly successful for them, or as the Wii U was, crash and burn quite terribly, and no one quite gets it. And of course the Virtual Boy, rest in peace to that. Idea before its time, I think that.
Oh yeah, I've talked about the Virtual Boy on the show before, and even with my friends, and it still boggles me that, well, it doesn't boggle me, but it's one of those things where you look at, even when Nintendo has like a quote unquote failed console, possibly like you mentioned the Wii U, because commercially it failed, but the software, the games for it are pretty good. New Super Mario's U, amazing. Super Mario 3D World, I had the Switch port. I'm playing through it with my girlfriend, and I absolutely love it. And of course, you got Mario Kart 8 when it first came out, Super Smash Brothers when it came out for the Wii U. Amazing titles, but still not really the killer apps that Nintendo needed. Because, like, do I really want this Wii U? Because even the naming convention for the Wii U was confusing. When I first heard of it, I thought, do I just buy the gamepad for maybe like $80 to $100 and that adds stuff to my Wii? Nope, it's a brand new system. You got to get a whole new console.
Yeah, the marketing wasn't the best. Like the way it was revealed at E3 was pretty terrible. But
Yeah,
you are right about the software. I mean, we see that increasingly with the Switch ports. You know, we had Pikmin 3 last year as well, which is an amazing one to pick up. Bayonetta 2, of course, only existed because Nintendo picked it up and put it on the Wii U. Wonderful 101, again, another platinum game. I mean, they made the Star Fox game for the N64, for the Wii U as well. You know, platinum, you know, were one of the, I guess, all right, those were all published by Nintendo, but, you know, they're not a Nintendo developer. They're a third-party developer, and they were probably one of the few third-party developers of note that were working on that console because, you know, it had EA and Ubisoft support at launch, but that sure faded fast. And you know, they were always like the compromised versions. You know, you weren't going to play Mass Effect 3 on the Wii U or Batman Arkham City. I want to say, not Asylum, it would have been City.
Yeah, it was City. City was the Arkham City. It's funny because like when the Wii U launched, it had Arkham City, the quote unquote armored edition.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's like a brand new edition for Batman Arkham City. And I'm like, I'd rather just play this game on, because when that came out, I was living at my university, and my roommate, he had a PS3, and one of my best friends, he had the game, so he just loaned me the game. I just played on my roommate's PS3. I'm like, man, this game is awesome. And then I look at the Wii U version, I'm like, that doesn't look as good.
Yeah, it's the. I mean, I guess we see that nowadays with, like, you know, if you get something on the Switch, like, you know, I've replayed The Witcher 3 on Switch, having played it the first time on PS4. And, you know, it doesn't look the same, but we kind of forgive the Switch because of what the Switch is and the convenience of it. Like, to play that, I mean, I realize this isn't a retro chat at all at the moment, but to play a game of the size of The Witcher 3 on a handheld, on the train going to work, was like, this blows my mind. And I know that with the internet, you know, you can stream it to basically to a phone. You know, you can run Game Pass to various devices, and it's on that. But, you know, offline, just running, you know, moment to moment, beat by beat, it's the same game. All right, the trees don't look quite so good. I don't care. You know, the story's still there and the characters are still there, and that's what makes it. But yeah, I mean, I actually wrote a little thing when the Switch had its 4th anniversary a few weeks ago, and I basically just wrote that, like, it's absolutely my favorite console of all time. And, you know, I've messed around with my share of them over the years. So I think what Nintendo have got going is really good. I you know, at the time of recording this, we don't know what the next Switch is going to be. Maybe by the time it comes out, we will know. But I'm excited to see what the next thing for them is. Like, they don't need to follow the 4K thing. They don't need to, like, do what everyone else is doing. So I hope it's something else that we haven't seen coming. Because, like, when the Switch was first leaked, we were like, that's ridiculous, that'll never work. And then oh damn, it totally works, like to the tune of like 87 million sales or something so far. Like, it's obscene. Yeah, it's really good.
I will always remember when I got my Switch. This is before Toys R Us went out of business. There was a Toys R Us close to my house. I called them the day before, and they said, yes, we're gonna get a shipment of Switches in, but you need to show up at the store early, because when I showed, they only had, like, I want to say 30 systems coming their way. It was like 30. It was below 100. It was a very low number. So I wake up early in the morning. I drive to the store, and there's already a line. I wait in line. They give me a ticket. Like, this is your ticket, so come back in an hour. So I went and got breakfast. I read a book in my car, and then I got my Switch. I went, and then I was just like thinking, like, this is amazing, because I got my Switch. I got my Pro Controller. I got Breath of the Wild. I took it to my friend's house because we were recording the main show, the Fake Nerd podcast, and I'm showing it off to him. I was like, guys, I could play this on my TV, and I could play it in my hands. This is so cool.
It's one of those rare occasions, I think, where the market, you know, we just mentioned there about the Wii U marketing being all wrong.
Yeah.
And when Nintendo was showing the Switch off, when they first kind of showed it, like, here's someone playing their Switch, and they take it off to their friends, like rooftop party or whatever. They
Yeah.
take off the controllers, the Joy-Cons, and they play with their friends. Excuse me. And you're thinking, there's no way it just works like that. There's no way. Like, we're so used to watching technology adverts where it's like sequence is shortened, or something is simulated, and then you realize, no, that's exactly how it works, and
Yeah.
that's why it's so good. Like, I mean, Nintendo has a better hit rate than most. The Wii U and the Virtual Boy side, N64 and the GameCube didn't sell loads. Like, they both were not the market leaders in their generations, but they did enough, and they were loved enough to keep them going. There was one point, I'm probably fudging my stories a little bit here, but I'm sure I read something like Microsoft came in and tried to buy Nintendo once, like at the start of the noughties. Like, you can fact check that after the show, but I'm pretty sure there's documented a story around that where like Nintendo weren't having the best time. They were moving on to the GameCube, or Dolphin as it was then, and Microsoft were like, they were like, they knew they were going to come out swinging the Microsoft, and they wanted Nintendo to make games just for them, and Nintendo just went, go away. Because of course, Microsoft did buy up a load of studios. They bought up Rare, was one of their early acquisitions. So yeah, it just makes me laugh, like, that kind of alternative history of gaming we could have had if Nintendo had gone, what, yeah, fair enough, we'll throw in with you, Microsoft. Imagine what that first Xbox would have been like with just the power of Nintendo making its exclusive games for it. It'd be crazy.
That would be insane, because there would have been another Sega situation where Sega thankfully didn't get bought out by anyone else, but they just after the Dreamcast, they just duck out of the console market. And then when their first game, Sonic Heroes, was the first Sonic game to appear on a Nintendo console.
Yeah.
And I remember when Melee was coming out, rumors were flying about Sonic being a unlockable character in Melee.
Mm-hmm.
Those rumors, of course, they didn't come true until Smash Bros. Brawl. So, but I mean, it's still weird. Like, even like the Banjo-Kazooie amiibo that just came out, and people are saying it's so weird that this was a Nintendo 64, a famous N64 game, and now that Microsoft owns Rare, the developer, you look at the bottom of the amiibo, there's like a little copyright from Microsoft Studios on there. It's like, it just feels so weird that this had its start on Nintendo. It essentially came home for a hot second for Smash Bros, but it's still owned by Microsoft.
I kind of like it when you get that cross-pollination, though, because, through the 80s and the 90s, when you were a kid in those eras, I mean, it exists today. There is a degree of console tribalism today. I spend quite a lot of my career, having to look on Facebook and other social media platforms, and you do see it. It does exist, but it was so like, you were Sega, or you were Nintendo, or in home computers you were Amiga, or you were Atari ST, and that became PlayStation or Xbox going forward. By the time you got to, well, I suppose Saturn or PlayStation was a thing briefly, but you say about Sega there, no one bought them out, because they ruined themselves. Sega's own mismanagement. I love Sega to pieces, by the way, but
me too.
Its own mismanagement in the 90s between America and Japan was hilarious. But that cross-pollination is something I do like, and I'm not into that kind of like we're all chums at E3, everyone on the stage together thing. But when I see stuff like PlayStation publishing MLB, right? MLB The Show 21, that's coming straight to Game Pass at launch. Like, I love that. Like, why wouldn't they do that? Like, this is money. This is a great way to put your brand in front of all these other people. Like, I think, if Xbox did get Game Pass to run, even a selection of Game Pass running on Switch, that would be incredible. I don't think that's out of the, I don't think that's a fantasy at all. I don't think that's something that's completely unreasonable. So it is cool to see that. And like you say, it doesn't feel that long ago. I mean, it was that long ago. You're getting on for nearly 20 years. That you started seeing Sonic on Nintendo stuff, like Sonic Advance on the Game Boy Advance, and all those games are fantastic.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it used to be very, very, very hard lines. I went from Sega Master System to Mega Drive, and on from there. Whereas my brothers had the Nintendo, so we had them in the house, but it was still like that was their Nintendo and mine was the Sega's, and that was the way it worked. And in the playground, I mean, I used to read all the Sega magazines as a kid, and one of them, Sega Pro, probably came with a little badge that said Mario sucks. And I remember sticking that on my bag at school, you know, when I'm 11 or 12 years old. Mario sucks. And of course, I'd go around my Nintendo owning friends' houses and quite happily sit there and play Super Mario World and
Yeah.
things. But yeah, it was, I didn't have a Nintendo to call my own, a Nintendo console till like the GameCube, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Oh no, Game Boy before then. Game Boy before
Okay.
then. Yeah, but Game Boy was a whole other thing. Like, you know, that was
Yeah.
like, you know, in the handheld space, it was like, yeah, you could have a Mega Drive, but you could have a Game Boy with it, right? That was okay because, you know, no offense to the Game Gear, but yeah, it wasn't so good. You know, you could play the better version. You know, why would I play Streets Race 2 on the Game Gear when it's here on the Mega Drive / Genesis and is a lot better? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so going back to your book, you mentioned the Amiga and the Atari earlier. Your very first chapter in the book is about the Atari 2600, which is like the first big video game console, like true home video game console. I was actually curious because even though Atari is like the true video game console, there's really no mention of the Magnavox Odyssey. Was that your decision to leave the Odyssey, even though the Odyssey? There's debate in the retro gaming circles about where the Odyssey is truly a video game system or where it's not, because you had to have all these peripherals. You had to slap a thing on the TV to play the games properly. Whereas the Atari, you just slap a cart and then boom, there it is. So, like, there is like you do talk about or you mention the Magnavox Odyssey 2 at the end of the chapter with Atari's competition, such as the Fairchild, Channel F, and a bunch of other very old systems like the Intellivision, the ColecoVision. Why did you decide to leave the Magnavox Odyssey out? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
I'm not a diehard Magnavox fan because every time I think about video games, I'm like, so do they mention the Odyssey? Okay, cool. There's the Atari. We're good.
Yeah, it comes back to what he said, like, where does it start and where does it finish? You know, for a lot of people, they will immediately recognize Atari. You know, you start talking about the brown box and stuff and what led to the Odyssey. It becomes a little, you know, that's there and that's important, but this was more of I guess a memory lane pitch, more of a like, what did people have? And that's kind of why it comes in there. Like, I can still remember those Ataris being sold when I was 10, the junior version, you know, 2600 junior, when I was about 11 or maybe even 12 years old. So the very early 90s, like there was a magazine shop in the UK called Argos, still exists. And, you know, you'd get your magazine and you'd fill out a little code and you go into the shop and you give them the code and then you get your product. You know, so it wasn't like a shop you could go in and browse. And they sold the Atari into, you know, the 2600 Junior into about 1992. So in my head, that was like, okay, I know when I was into that kind of 8-bit into 16-bit era, that Atari was still around, and I've got one in the wardrobe, just
nice.
Obviously out of sight, out of picture. Like, I've still got one. So that's kind of why that was, and like, it's such a big brand name, of course, that, you know, when you're talking about like from a thing to a thing, you know, it's quite easy to go like, yeah, from Atari, you know, we'll start with Atari. And I guess it reconnects it a bit to, you know, Pong and everything in the arcade space. You know, if people, you know, understand how that company came to be, you know, it started with why I've just gone, but Space War, sorry, and then Pong, you know, the next year became the hit that it was. So yeah, that was about it, really. Like, you know, if it was a more comprehensive book, which it definitely isn't, you know, we could have had a bit more of a deep dive there. You know, you mentioned the Fairchild there, like the story of the Fairchild Channel F.
Oh yeah,
is very, very significant. You know, obviously that preceded the Atari 2600. And was the first, you know, to have proper interchangeable cartridges, right? That's a huge, huge deal. You know, it didn't have very many. It was like half a dozen, six or seven. I'm trying to think.
It was a very low number. Well, also the Fairchild Channel F that sold like tiny little, like,
yeah.
I didn't even know the Fairchild existed until just like maybe a year ago.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for the longest time, it was kind of a footnote, and then you start looking at the lineage of things. So, and that, like you say, like, we've got space in the book for a little bit about it, but it's really just kind of like a bit of complementary color, I suppose, to like the main narrative, you know, from Atari through to Nintendo and Sega, and then, you know, some of the home computer stuff. I mean, interestingly, I mean, you know, you being in America, you wouldn't have got the Spectrum in quite the same way we did in the UK.
No,
But
actually,
that for me was a big one to include, because the Spectrum in this country, that was a huge deal.
yeah, funny enough, I was actually going to ask you. So, because I'm actually really cool. Not cool. Very glad that you do mention a lot of the early PC games, because I don't know if this is just a strictly American thing or if it's just a very niche thing. But I am aware of how big PC games, early PC games, were in the UK and Europe, and I want to say Australia. I could be wrong, but because here in America, I mean, me growing up as a kid, my first home personal computer was a Windows 95. I didn't know what the Commodore was. I didn't know I obviously didn't know what a Spectrum was. I just remember seeing my parents come home with a Windows 95, and I'm like, can I play games on that? I can? Cool. But then when I get older, I start doing these deep dives. I'm learning about the Commodore 64, the Atari line of computers that they had, and seeing these these primitive games for these computers. It just blows my mind about how far PC games have come. So you mentioning these old PC games or these old PCs in this book, I'm like, this is actually very interesting, because games for the home computer were still going. They were going strong while consoles were the main talk around the campfire.
They were big time, yeah. I mean, in this country, certainly the Amiga 500 was a huge home computer. Like, you know, if you had an Amiga 500, you were allowed to take the mickey out of your mates who had an ST, because the ST was kind of the same kind of thing, but not quite as powerful. Like, games never looked quite so good. They didn't sound quite so good as the Amiga. And Commodore had done really, really well before the Amiga. They did the C64, which I think is still the biggest selling home computer model ever. I mean, we don't really get computers in the same way anymore, so it's kind of a moot stat. You know, nothing's going to overtake it. But yeah, like you say, the Commodore 64, that 8-bit computer, Atari's 8-bit range that they were coming out with, they were big deals. I mean, Amstrad in this country was a big player in that space as well. Anyone in the UK, well, pretty much everyone in the UK knows who Alan Sugar is. He was on the UK's version of The Apprentice. So you had the future president of the United States, and we had Sir Alan Sugar, who founded Amstrad, you know, back in the day.
I mean, our country is still our country is still kind of reeling from that whole thing. It's like
I won't bring it up again. Don't worry.
I mean, I try to talk about video games. I mean, when politics and video games do collide, of course, we'll talk about that on the show. But I'm trying to keep all that stuff out. Like,
keep it safe. You said PG-13. We can't go there without breaking that rule. But yeah,
you are right.
Yeah. Home computers were a very big thing. Like, we had a Spectrum, we had an Amiga at home. One of the key reasons they were so significant to people growing up and loving video games was the crazy piracy that went on those platforms. So, like, you know, you couldn't go to your mate's house and rip a Mega Drive cartridge, but you can quite easily make, you know, 40 copies of Magic Pockets for the Amiga if you wanted to. Sorry, Bitmap Brothers, please don't come for me. But yeah, you know, you would copy Spectrum games, you'd copy Amiga games, and that's how they got shared around. And the first time I played Street Fighter 2 in my house, like in my home, was on the Amiga port, because my dad brought it home. Like, my dad used to work nights, and so, like, they had a setup at work, I guess. You know, they worked in a factory, maintenance. If nothing was broken, they had hours to kill. So I'm sure I'm trivializing my dad's job there somewhat, but sorry, he won't listen. But yeah, like, he'd come back with a bunch of discs. I remember Street Fighter 2 coming on, like, I don't know, it was probably like on 4 or 5 discs. Like, I would way too many. Might have even been more than that. And, like, you know, on an Amiga, like, you've only got the one trigger, the one fire button. So here's a 6-button arcade game on one trigger. It was rubbish. But it was my rubbish, and I owned that. Like, the Amiga was my thing. While we had a Master System and then later a Mega Drive and stuff in that home as well, and a Super Nintendo and a PlayStation. But the Amiga hung around for a while. Like, it did. I had some great games. Like, I mean, you know, Doom obviously came out for PCs and stuff, and you had, like, Warcraft starting out in the early 90s. But yeah, on the Amiga, you had there was just some amazing stuff being made on that home computer, which is just kind of, well, it's never really gone out of the retro conversation. Like, people, you know, companies like Psygnosis that got bought by Sony, of course. They did Wipeout, but they did Shadow of the Beast and loads of other games on the Amiga. Sensible Software did some really cool games. Cannon Fodder's Sensible Soccer. and the Bitmap Brothers did Speedball 2, Gods, Magic Pockets, Xenon 2, just incredible games that are like they look so good now. They look so crisp that if you go back and play something like the Chaos Engine, which was on Mega Drive as well and SNES, I think that's a phenomenal game even now. Like it's a real, it's almost like it's not Proto Diablo, but it kind of is like that looter. Like it's a bit of a looter shooter fantasy thing. You know, unlock a bunch of stuff and escape a level. There's some really cool stuff back then. So yeah, I had to include that. But on the Spectrum front, I do remember the publisher saying, like, did that sell in America? Did anyone have the Spectrum? No, they didn't. But I'm gonna put it in, and you're gonna have to just roll with it. Like it'll be fine. Don't worry about it because it's sold in its millions over here. There's a great film which I've completely forgotten the name of. It's so good I've forgotten the name of it. But the BBC, I want to say, made a film about Sir Clive Sinclair and his battles with other computer manufacturers, which is worth a look at because the guy who made the Spectrum was a bit of an eccentric, should we say?
I want to say, I could be completely wrong. You guys get Black Mirror over in the UK?
Yeah. Charlie Brooker's show, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there was this episode. It was a huge deal when it first came out. Bandersnatch, the Black Mirror Bandersnatch. It was like the Choose Your Own Adventure, which is about a video game programmer. And I want to say that when he was coding the game, it looks like a Spectrum keyboard when he was coding.
Yeah. That's set in the 80s, isn't it? I've not actually played it, but yeah, I remember. So when that launched, I was working in East London. And they kind of took over Old Street Station. They set up like a fake old video game store in Old Street Station, and it was really like the old kind of like big box game packaging and stuff. And they'd set it all out, so it was all by that fake publisher. It was really really cool to see. Sort of like dashed across from work to have a look and take some pictures because I was working at the time for a company called Vice, and we just started our video game coverage. Well, no, hadn't just started it. Hang on, when was Bandersnatch? No way, man. That was only like last year, right?
No, I want to say it was like 20. I want to say it's 2018.
Yeah, maybe it was my current job. I raced over there. If it was Vice, I would have been a lot closer. So that's probably why I was so hopelessly out of breath. But yeah, that whole aesthetic that's in that is very Spectrum, way more than C64. C64 felt a little bit closer, I guess, to your Sega and Nintendo a little bit. Like, I mean, they even had a cartridge, that you could plug into it. You didn't get any of that on a Spectrum. It was all, well, they did have discs, but they were rubbish. But it was all cassette tapes. Like, the very idea that games came on cassette tape is just laughable to some people, I'm sure. But for us, it was like totally normal. Yeah, you put it in and you let it do its thing, and then 10 minutes later you play the game. Like, that's how long. Well, it rarely took that long, but sometimes it certainly felt like it could take that long.
No, funny enough that you mentioned the cassette tapes for the C64. I just like recently I put up a poll on my Twitter account, and because one of the people who follow me on Twitter got me in touch with someone else, and she is a huge Commodore 64 fan. And I want to say for like a good hour or so, we were just like tweeting each other back and forth, talking about the C64, showing me pictures of her cassette games, of the disk drive that the C64 had. And I've never seen stuff like this before. And I'm like, good God. She's like, yeah, you totally need to play it. I'm like, I don't have the room for a Commodore. I mean, yes, there is a Commodore 64 Mini that I saw. And I thought, that looks really cool, but I don't have space for it. It's nice and small. I have space for it, but it's really like, I don't know anything about the C64. I just know that was a thing. And I've heard that the Mini, some people love it, some people hate it. So it's a bit of like, I don't know.
It's one of those where the game selection isn't quite what you would want from it. I mean, there's the whole load of licensing, situations going on there. But yeah, like, I mean, the C64, the Spectrum, I mean, that's an era of home computer gaming where the standout titles that hold up today are pretty few and far between, I would say, at the risk of like being chastised by people who grew up with that stuff. But like, some older games are hard to go back to, and that's kind of the era where they are a bit harder. When you're in that 16-bit era with the Amiga and the ST, those games are a lot more comfortable. They feel a lot more connected to the era. Now, maybe it's because of kind of rise of indies over the last 10, 12 years, and we're quite happy with pixel art. That kind of aesthetic still ticks the boxes. Like I was just playing Narita Boy last week or the week before, a new game that Team 17 had published, and it's all like super duper pixel art. It has a kind of like another world kind of fluidity to the animation and stuff. Like it's an echo of that era, and it still plays great today. But yeah, when I go back to some Spectrum stuff, so like Dizzy was a huge thing in the UK. Like Dizzy, little egg dude with gloves and boots, and there's a really great little retro console called the Evercade that came out last year. It's got like bespoke cartridges and stuff, and they did an Oliver Twins cartridge, so it's got Dizzy and stuff on it. And I was playing those games for a bit because you think, Mario still holds up. You can still play Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario Brothers 3, and they're still a good time. Those Dizzy games have really, really dated. And it's partly because just the way they don't scroll. It's screen, which makes it feel really, really primitive. But yeah, just it lacks a certain precision that you forgave at the time. You totally forgave because like this was your game, and unless you were a naughty person copying a load of games, you didn't get many games when you were a kid. Like I explain this to my kids sometimes because they're so used to, daddy's got this game, daddy's got that game. They kind of come through work and what have you. But when I had a Master System, for instance, I think I had about 17 games total for that. When I was a kid, because that's all I managed to acquire over the duration of me having a Master System, and it's actually the only console I've ever sold. So like I don't have it anymore. So I never added to it in my adult life. Whereas the Mega Drive, every well, I don't know, a couple of times a year I'll just go onto eBay and go like, yeah, why not? I'll treat myself to something I'm going to set the Mega Drive up for, play once, and then never touch again. Like same with the Dreamcast, same with even the PS2. Occasionally, I'm like, I've got way too many PS2 games, but every now and again something will just pop up, and you're like, yeah, go on then, why not?
Yeah. There are times where even though coronavirus is still a thing, there are some places here in the United States where they have like immense safety measures in place, so I can still go game shopping here every once in a while. And I'm actually there. I told myself that if I can find them, I'm going to get 3 Atari 2600 games, even though I don't own a 2600 and probably never will, just for the sole purpose of saving them for like historical preservation purposes. E.T., Yar's Revenge, and Adventure.
Well, you should be able to find all of those, I would think. Those are pretty popular ones. I could never play Yar's Revenge. There's something about that game that really put me off. It's like, oh man, did my head in. But Adventure, I actually played that a few years ago, and like it is what it is, right? It's like dead simple, but you can feel it as this foundational thing for exactly what the genre that it spawned, right? It is there. Here's a little dot on screen, and that dot gets a key, and the key opens the door. Yep, that's Zelda. That's a Zelda dungeon, but with yellow and blue lines. It's there's a certain beauty to it. It's why I can still play Pac-Man, right? I mean, I know we're both sat here with a Pac-Man behind us, but I was playing. Which one was I playing? I actually played Pac-Mania today, the isometric one, and even that, like, I'm still like, I'm just having fun with this. Like, it's so elemental that it kind of doesn't matter what it looks like. I know there were terrible Pac-Man ports over the years. I've actually just been working
at you.
the Atari 2600 version, which made its programmer a millionaire pretty much overnight. So fair play to those. He did work 80-hour weeks, which is not so good for like 6 months. Probably nearly killed him, but he did become a millionaire off the back of it. But I've been working on a Pac-Man book, actually, not writing it, just doing some edits for a new Pac-Man book, and it's just sending me down this little path of playing these different ports, because like the NES port of Pac-Man is great. That 2600 port is an absolute disaster, though. I kind of love it for how bad it is.
But, I played the 2600 port at a gaming convention in the before times, and I knew it existed. I've seen pictures of it, I've seen gameplay of it, but actually playing it is just, I'm sitting there and just like, man, if I was a kid in the early 80s and I went to the arcade religiously and I saw Pac-Man in the arcade and I heard Atari was coming out with Pac-Man, my brain would instantly thought, what I'm getting at the arcade is what I'm going to get at home. And the second I pop that cart in, I'm like, what? I would have been so mad. So mad. I mean, the NES port of Pac-Man is good, but it's not my favorite. A lot.
Quite good, yeah.
I mean, yes, it's good. It looks a lot like the original arcade, but to me, the NES port of Pac-Man is just not as tight. Like the controls aren't as tight. Like, I don't know. It's like my preferred way to play Pac-Man is with a joystick, not with the D-pad. I mean, if I have to use the D-pad, I'll use the D-pad, but I prefer a joystick standing up with a drink next to me and just like trying to get a high score.
It's a classic one-handed game. That's all the best ones were. All the best ones. Yeah, Pong famously. Here's the little twiddler, the little knob. Yeah, and then you've got your little shelf for a beer. But yeah, like that. Yeah, it's funny because a little bit after that we kind of got into this race for the arcade experience at home, but the fuss that Atari made over that Pac-Man game in 82, I think that Pac-Man game came out, the Atari 2600 port. And oh my god, yeah, just an absolute disaster. And obviously you mentioned ET, famous disaster, but what we used to see growing up, and I'm guessing it was the same in the US. Like if you had a new Amiga game or a new Spectrum game or a new 64 game in the shop, like you'd pick it up. And the screenshots on the back would be like of the best version, right? So like you could buy a Spectrum game on cassette that would have the Amiga screenshots on the back. So you wouldn't necessarily know what you were getting until you got it home and put it in. And of course, there were so many arcade ports, so many arcade adaptations that you'd think, oh, I'm going to get this game. This is what I'm going to have. And it would be, wildly, wildly different because obviously the hardware just wasn't there for that. Like I still love that kind of, the arcade quality, the arcade realism, which everyone was shouting about, like even through the PlayStation times, into that first kind of PS1 Saturn era, where it'd be like, oh, here's Daytona on Saturn. It's not as good. It's not as good as the arcade. This isn't the arcade experience. It was only with the Dreamcast, which basically ran all those Naomi board arcade machines where you could actually say, like, here is the arcade game at home. Oh, apart from Neo Geo, I guess, which was, a whole other realm of impossible. Like, I didn't know anyone who ever had a Neo Geo. If anyone ever tried that nonsense at school, we'd have shut them down. My dad's mate's son has got a Neo Geo. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. No one owns a Neo Geo. I didn't even see a Neo Geo until I was like in my 20s. I was like, oh wow, they do exist.
I would see the Neo Geo arcade cabinets.
Oh yeah.
I would see them in like just random places. I mean, I would see them in restaurants every once in a while. I remember seeing one at a car wash, at my local car wash. And I think the only time I ever saw an actual Neo Geo system out in the wild is at a trade show I go to, or it's not really a trade show. It's like a collectible show. It's like a nerd swap meet. I talk about this show a lot here on the show, but they were selling, it was just the base system, the control stick and the system itself. They had no games for it. $1,500. It's yours. And I'm just like looking at this going, good God. And even seeing the cartridges, I've never seen a cartridge in like real life. I've seen pictures of it, but it's just the arcade board.
Yeah.
It's just the arcade board. I'm like, how do you store these?
In very large boxes.
Yeah.
like somewhere with temperature control. No, that was a whole other realm of collecting, which of course nowadays, you have so many SNK, Neo Geo collections. Like, I mean, it's over here as well. Actually, if I just tilt this around, you can just about see there's a little Neo Geo Mini hiding there as well.
There it is.
So the fact that you can have one of those, I mean, the Neo Geo Mini isn't great, but it's a fine enough way to play your Metal Slug and your Samurai. Can't even talk Samurai Showdown if you really need to. They're all on. I mean, most of them are on Switch and PlayStation and everything else now. It's kind of. Yeah, you don't need that. It's a well, that's another big retro debate, isn't it? Like, is it really the real thing? And I've kind of reached a point in my life where I can't keep buying stuff. So if I get the opportunity, like we just had the Neo Geo Pocket Color collection or whatever it's called, like Volume 1 come out for Switch. It's got like, I think it's only like 8, maybe 10 games on it. Maybe 10 games. They're mostly fighters, of course. It's Neo Geo.
Yeah.
But for a few years, I've been looking at getting a Neo Geo Pocket Color because they did come out in the UK, but they weren't really widespread. They had a better shake of it in America actually, than the Pocket Color. And I played around with one, funnily enough, at a show, a bit like what you say, at a show in the Midlands, so in the UK, and kind of immediately fell in love with it. I was like, oh my God, I really need one of these. But like over the years, I just haven't been able to get one, and they're not extraordinarily expensive. But yeah, then that collection came out, and it had the volume 1 next to it, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'll probably just wait for volume 2, and because a lot of those Neo Geo Pocket games are in Japanese, so like, okay, well, these are all at least the Western ones, right? I'm getting there. And like I'm happy enough with that. Like I don't feel I have to go and get the original hardware, which is why, like, if Sega magically produced like a Dreamcast Mini, I'd be like, brilliant. Like I can just retire my Dreamcast and put it out the way. Like, it depends what's on it, I suppose. But
yeah,
the more I mess around with that original hardware that isn't getting any younger, I'm just like, well, it's going to give up at some point. How much am I going to mess around repairing things? Like I've got knackered old computers and consoles in the loft. Like Amstrad made a console called the GX4000, absolute piece of trash, but I've got one. It doesn't work, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to get rid of it, but I'm also not going to pay to fix it. It's just like one of those things that, like, well, if anyone ever wants to see it, like here's Amstrad's like failed console. You can't play it, but it's a piece of history. It's a bit like what you were saying about, like, buying some 2600 games to kind of preserve them. There is a certain beauty to that, but at the same time, to actually play these things, like I'm quite happy with the emulated collections. We say the legal emulated,
the legal ones, yeah,
the legal ones, yeah.
You hear that, FBI guy? We like the legal stuff here.
Absolutely, I'm a big advocate for it. Like every time though I talk about like these collections or Mega Drive Mini, SNES Mini, whatever, you can guarantee there'll be someone in the comments of an article just going like, just get the ROMs, why would it, just play it on your phone? I don't want to play it on my phone. I want to use the proper controller. I want to use a proper dedicated game system. My phone is for calls and Twitter and stuff. Like it's not for playing games on. So
yeah,
I do, I don't know, like if you're like super young today and you've got your Raspberry Pi or whatever, and you feel like you can put the world, the last 30 years of games on it, like that, a part of me gets quite sad at that. I think it's important for people, for publishers, for platforms to protect their IPs and stuff, but at the same time make them available. Like it does my head in. Anyone who knows me and is listening to this, and it's a retro thing, would have expected me to mention this game already, but it blows my mind that Snatcher isn't available anywhere.
Oh,
like blows my mind.
Funny enough, before the last guy I had on the show, Patrick Brickhouse of the Retro Blast podcast, his latest episode, I mean, when this comes up, that it's not the latest episode, but as the time is recording, his newest episode is, funny enough, about Snatcher.
Snatchers. There you go.
And we were talking. When I had him on, we were talking. You can listen to that right now on our audio feeds on our YouTube channel. But I just find it hilarious that you just mentioned Snatchers. I was like, I just heard about that game. That was like one of Hideo Kojima's very first games before he blew up with Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, well, it was between the Metal Gear and its sequel, because it was 88 on the MSX. But then when the PAL one, the Mega CD version, came out about 1994, it sold naff all. So sold nothing. And I played it. I was about 16, I guess. Like borrowed it off like someone's brother in college. Thought it was amazing. Gave it back. Borrowed it again. Asked to buy it, and said brother's sister, who I was friends with, said like, oh, he wants like £35 for it. I'm like, I'm not paying £35 for this game. And of course now it's like what, like £300, £400, whatever that is in dollars. Like,
oh my God,
ridiculous. And you can't play it anywhere. You can't get it.
No.
I've still got a Mega CD like in my house right now. Like if someone just brought Snatch around, we could play it. But that's it's really wild to me that I can't play that anywhere. But there are other games like I mentioned it earlier on. Sensible Software made a football game, an association football, a British football game called Sensible Soccer. Amazing game. Like this is pre-FIFA.
Right.
FIFA taking over the world. I love that game. And it is coming out again later this year, actually on the Evercade, that retro console. But until then, like again, that game's just been lost. Like, to play it officially, you can't do it, and that's why it's, I don't know, like, it's really sad when you see, oh, Sony's turning off these stores, and of course, like, there's not that much demand for it, but when products just disappear, it's terrible. Like, the PS3 version of Daytona USA is really good, guys. So if you want a good home copy of the Daytona USA, please go get that. And it's got like Nights into Dreams and stuff on there. Like Sonic CD is on the PlayStation Store right now. Like, go get that. That's an amazing 2D Sonic game. So
yeah, Sonic CD was my very first Sonic game. That not played. The very first game I played was Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but CD was the first Sonic game that was mine. Because my parents bought for me. My dad came home with the Windows 95. The very next day, he went out to the store and got me the 95 port of Sonic CD. That's my favorite game of all time. Thankfully, the iOS port, pretty damn good.
Is it? Oh, okay, I bet that. It's probably the same version that's on the PlayStation Store.
Yeah, it is.
Probably, yeah. I mean, again, that's something that, like, you know, if that was on, I mean, I don't know, some sort of mega CD collection or some kind of, like, you know, forgotten Sega collection, and they brought, like, because Virtua Racing is on the Switch, right? And that's pretty much the arcade version. You know, it's the Formula One car, it's the 3 tracks. But the 32X version of Virtua Racing Deluxe, is really good. It's like 3 different cars, 5 tracks. Like, it's so much. That's the one to have, and we haven't got it right. Like, I've got it here. Like, if I wanted to set it up, but, like, can I have that on my Switch? Like, that's what I want. Just put everything on Switch. Like, just put everything on Switch, and I'll be happy. That's basically all I need in my life. Like, if there are certain games, Snatcher being one of them, that, like, you know, if Konami just decided to, like, okay, we're going to put that on Switch, well done, it's out in 2 weeks' time, I will not, like, ask for anything else from the gaming gods for at least another year. I'll be good. I'll be happy. I'll be so happy.
Like, it's because Sega puts out a lot of Genesis collections, which I'm not mad about, but how many Genesis collections? We have so many Genesis collections, and I actually kind of agree with you. Like, put a 32X out, put a Sega CD something out.
I'd love to see that stuff. Yeah, I mean, the 32X is wild, right? I mean, that we mentioned everyone before, like, you know, Sega kind of being the architects of its own demise, but Sega of America making that, and Sega Japan making the Saturn at the same time. You're just like, guys, I mean, this is pre-Zoom. Like, you know, if Zoom was a thing back then, I'm sure we would have never got the 32X. It was a weird one. I mean, it was your guys' fault, really. You kept on buying the Genesis. You know, if you did stop buying the Genesis, Sega of America wouldn't have gone, oh no, we need a way to continue, you know, to keep people buying the Genesis. It was just
the Mega Drive was also. The Mega Drive was also super popular in Europe, right?
Oh yeah. That was Sega's. Like, the Master System had done quite well in the UK, certainly, and in other territories, like other parts of Europe and in South America. The Master System did really, really well, really big in Brazil. But yeah, like, the Mega Drive was the big one, and of course in America it made Sega in America, really, which is, you know, kind of, you know, coming full circle with what Service Games was, based out of Hawaii, and then, you know, merging and going to Japan and all the rest of it, and then coming back to the States. But yeah, like, I mean, I don't know. I do know what the marketing of the Genesis was like in America, but even in the UK, it was very much like, this is the cool one.
Yeah.
This is the one, you know, this isn't like, you know, your baby brother's Nintendo. This is the one that, like, you know, they had, like, adverts with, you know, young, cool, hip guys playing games in their trailers and stuff, and you know, made Sonic, you know, this cute blue hedgehog, look like the absolute, like, most dangerous video game character you've ever seen. You know, the parents are going to be outraged or something. They weren't. The parents were fine.
No, it is so interesting to see how, because you're one of, like, you're not the first international guest we've had on our family of podcasts, but you're definitely, I'm pretty sure you're definitely the first one from England on the show, especially on Base Market Posman. You're the first international one. So just hearing how different things are in the UK as compared to America, because I mean, here, I feel like the whole world knows how, like, screw you, the us Americans are when it comes to our advertisements and our marketing strategies. Like, even though I was technically alive during this era, I don't remember, because I was born in 1990. I was born in November of 1990. So I didn't realize what was going on until much later, or much after the console war ended. But seeing these old commercials like Genesis does what Nintendo don't, or welcome to the next level, you have like the drag race with the TV, and then you have this like busted out ice cream van with Super Mario Kart on it. It's like, man, we are brutal.
Well, it worked. It worked.
It did.
And you know, all of I mean, you know, not that the SNES did badly in America, but they did redesign it. You know, they made it. Yeah, there are very few things that upset me when I look back in gaming history, but the American butchering of the Super Nintendo or the Super Famicom into what came out as the SNES over there is one of them. Completely irrational, by the way. Like, it plays the same games, albeit the cartridges are different. And it was only because of the SNES's popularity in America that we got things like, you know, I got to play like Final Fantasy 3 or Final Fantasy 6 as it was, but it came out as Final Fantasy 3 and Chrono Trigger. You know, we would get a lot of American imports in the UK, and you had to play them with an adapter. You had to put a PAL cartridge in, and I can't remember if it was in front of it or behind it. But yeah, so fair play. It was popular enough that they would translate some of those RPGs and release them in America, but they didn't come to here. More's the pity.
Speaking of also quick thing on the Super Nintendo, because I have my Game Boy Advance SP here. I show this off all the time whenever I can. Yeah, I have it. I got it reshelled to make it look like the Super Famicom and the PAL version of the Super Nintendo, because even though growing up here in America, I was used to the purple. I like the multicolor one a little bit more.
I think it's the more iconic of the two, should we say? Like if you let that green, yellow, red, and blue button configuration, like you immediately think of the. I immediately think of the SNES anyway. Of course, the Xbox 360 copied it as well, but
totally,
steal from the best if you're going to steal from anything.
Very true. But you mentioned Chrono Trigger, and one of the questions I had for you about your book is that at the end of every chapter of every console, or even the end of chapter 12 with the sixth generation, you talk about certain games, Chrono Trigger being the one at the end of the SNES one. It's like these lists are like classic, the best of hits for any of these titles. How hard was it for you to pick like which titles were you going to talk about? Because obviously you have Chrono Trigger, you have Super Mario World, but you don't have like Mega Man X for the Super Nintendo. And then it's like so many. I could just like see the people like yelling in Congress here in America or yelling in Parliament in the UK about like those level style debates on which should be what considered like the best of those. So how hard was it for you to pick those games to mention in your book?
I mean, the great thing about being in print is you don't get people underneath going, I think you forgot, or where is XYZ? Honestly, like most of the time they were just my favorites. Like Mega Man, funnily enough, like I played on the NES, never really on the SNES. So like Mega Man, it kind of passed me by. Played it since because there's been a few collections. Like, thank you very much, Capcom. But yeah, like
please bring Mega Man Legends.
Yeah, it was one that it wasn't in the immediate mix. So when I went and expanded the lists out, it was like, yeah, that one wasn't at the forefront. Whereas something like Chrono Trigger, you know, funnily enough, it didn't even come out in the UK. I mean, the legacy of that game is so huge. What it did for Square at the time, you know, now Square Enix, it felt so much more. I really liked Secret of Mana, which I don't know if that's in the list.
No, it is. Secret of fun story. Secret of Mana or Mana. People pronounce it both. They always hate it when they say it. But when the Super Nintendo Mini was announced here in America and it said like, "Hey, we're including Secret of Mana," I'm like, I'm buying it.
Yeah. No,
I've heard nothing but amazing things about that RPG. I mean, eventually it would come out on the collection of Mana for the Switch, and then we got the HD remake Trials of Mana, which I play and I really enjoy. But just hearing that Secret of Mana was finally available, because I don't own a SNES. I never owned like the base system, but I could buy the smaller version, and it has it on there, and I don't need to buy the cartridge, because the cartridge can get expensive here in the States.
Yeah.
I mean, the same with Chrono Trigger. At a local game store I love going to, they have a CIB Chrono Trigger. They're selling it for $500. It's like, what would you rather have, the PlayStation 5 or Chrono Trigger? You have to pick one.
Yeah. I mean, Square were knocking it out of the park back there. You know, what came out in America as Final Fantasy 3 is, you know, Final Fantasy 6 is fantastic as well. Again, this is another game that you can play on other systems. I mean, Chrono Trigger on the DS is people ask me about that game, like what's the best to play it on, because it's on Steam as well. The Steam version is absolutely fine, but like I really like, because I don't know, playing that game on a Nintendo platform kind of feels right to me, and playing that DS one that has the PlayStation ports, like cinematics in there as well, but has like, you know, the touchscreen is actually really useful for the menu, for navigating the menus in it as well. So that's probably the best one to do. But yeah, when I look back at Chrono Trigger and I think about how we talked about before, like how that art stacks up, like some of the just there are moments in the game are fantastic. Like it introduces that, well, it probably doesn't introduce the idea of like you can go to the end when you want. Like that probably, I don't know for sure, that probably existed in other games before then. But just that kind of like you are the master of your own fate a little bit. Like it really did. It wasn't open world as such, but it had that feeling of you can go anywhere and do anything before that you know, before today's big open world games became a thing, you know. And there'll be people who say like you could do that in the original Legend of Zelda. You could, but like it didn't look as good or sound as good as what Chrono Trigger does.
Yeah, funny enough, I have the PlayStation port of Chrono Trigger. I bought it because it came bundled in with I want to say Final Fantasy 4, only because I've heard nothing but amazing things about Chrono Trigger. So I figured I'm just gonna get it. I haven't played it yet, but then doing some research, people keep saying that, oh yeah, the PlayStation port isn't the best. I mean, it's playable, it's fine,
Yeah, it's
but
fine. Yeah.
if you want, like talking to you, saying that the Nintendo DS version of Chrono Trigger is like the way to play it, I'm like now thinking, okay, well, if I ever find the DS version of Chrono Trigger, I'm probably gonna drop $100 because I looked up the price on it and it's about like
Is that expensive now as well? Is it?
Yeah, it's It's weird. So, like, do you think the SNES version of Chrono Trigger? I mean, yes, that's the first one. That's the most expensive one. I was like, oh my god, Chrono Trigger. But the later ports, it's like, okay, maybe it's a little cheaper. The Nintendo DS one is still really freaking expensive.
That's crazy.
It's like
I think I paid like £20 for that when it, not immediately after it came out, but a little while after it came out. Like that was just what it was, like £20.
I think I paid for my copy because it was. Hold on, let me show you my copy. I have it right here. As this is some great audio. Where are you? Nope, not you. There you are. Sorry. Here, okay, yeah. So here it is. It's like the greatest hits PlayStation 1 with Final Fantasy 4 and Chrono Trigger. And it is an absolute gore. I mean, there's like some stuff on the box, but the disc itself is completely clean. Audio listeners, I know you can't really see it, but there's like no scratches on my Chrono Trigger disc. And it is absolutely gorgeous, but people say that the PlayStation version isn't the best version to play Chrono Trigger on. It kind of bums me out because I got this for, I want to say $10 maybe.
I mean, that kind of, I mean, this is a thing with games like that. Like, unless you're talking about that Pac-Man difference, like the differences are pretty small. Like, I can remember when that PlayStation version of Chrono Trigger was announced and that they had the new animations added, and just thinking, oh, that one's going to be amazing. And like, I never actually played the PlayStation one, but I'm sure it's fine. I mean, you know, it's not going to be like when the Steam port came out and the graphics were all messed up and smoothed out of, like, there was no, they just bodged that. It got patched, didn't it? But yeah, it didn't have the best launch. But yeah, I mean, with the ordering of those games, they're like, I mean, funnily enough, I've got a copy down here. I can't even remember what some of them are, but let me see. Where's SNES? This is great. I'm gonna try to do this as quick as I can, so I can.
It's video. I mean, I just want to reach out for my own copy of the game.
Yeah, no, like Super Mario World, F-Zero, and F-Zero was a launch game, of course, and the Mode 7 showing off.
Oh yeah.
It's past Donkey Kong Country, Rare, yeah, Super Mario Kart, Star Fox. Oh yeah. So yeah, I just mentioned like about what Square was doing. So yeah, and Super Metroid being a huge game. Killer Instinct, oh my god, yeah, that was a huge thing over here. Yeah. I don't know if that was big in America, but yeah. And then I talk about like the American SNES and a bag of bread.
yeah, I saw that the bag of bread thing. I was like, you're not wrong.
Good anecdote, yeah, like that. But that I don't know, like that's kind of, it kind of ties in with how Sega of America was. Nintendo of America was very much like, we've got to do our own thing, we've got to put our own stamp on it. And, I kind of respect that. And it was no real surprise when you look back at like, how the original Xbox came out compared to the shape of the GameCube. It was very much like we wanted to be the big, strong thing. And Japan was like, here's just a cool thing. Here's a toy, it's got a handle. The Xbox wasn't like that. It's just, I mean, the PC Engine, for instance,
Oh
the
yeah.
PC Engine in Japan is like the size of a postage stamp. This tiny little thing, and then bless America, it's like, we're going to make the turbo graphics like it's got to be big. I mean, it still wasn't big, but it was bigger, like double the size. I kind of respect that.
No, just there are times when like going to retro game stores or going to a retro video game conventions and seeing like the displays of both the American versions and the international versions, like the Japanese, the PAL versions of these consoles. It's like, what was wrong with us? Like, if you tell me something, it's like, if you say, I think the name PC Engine is like, well, it's like a PC engine, but you can play really good games on it. You don't need a monitor. You just need your TV and a controller. You're fine. I'm like, that makes sense. But here in America, it's like Turbo Graphics 16. It's like, why do we have to sound like 10 times more? We're like the edgelords of the world. Why do we have to do this? Why are we like this?
Well, I quite like the name Turbo Graphics 16. It reminds me. It just sounds like a peripheral for something.
Yeah.
I quite like it, but. Yeah, I mean, PC Engine barely even scratched the surface in Europe. There was a very, very modest release for that. So, again, talking about, kind of retro revival stuff, that PC Engine Mini or TurboGrafx Mini in America that Konami put out last spring, I want to say, really, really, really great mini console. That, like, in terms of, I mean, that came out after the book was finished, so it's not mentioned. But fantastic. I mean, that's got Snatcher on it as well, but it's got Snatcher on it in Japanese, which is unplayable.
It's like, I don't speak Japanese and I don't read Japanese.
I've tried to play it with translate. Yeah, but it only it gives you a bit of a bodge job. It's not worth it. I gave up.
At that point, I would rather just. As much as I would love to learn Japanese, as much as I throughout my life, I've tried learning Japanese and I never succeeded. I'm like, no, I think I'll wait if Sega will re-release Snatchers or they'll re-release a bunch of stuff for if they'll re-release stuff for games. But
well, we have seen the digital pictures stuff that came out for the Mega CD. That stuff's come back around. Night Trap came out again.
Yeah.
I want to say Double Switch came out again, and Ground Zero Texas is imminent if it's not out already. I'm actually looking forward to that one. Ground Zero Texas is one of those FMV games of the 90s that I really, really enjoyed.
Okay.
More so than Night Trap. I realize this is a bit of a niche thing, and of course it was the Sega CD in America. Excuse me, not the Mega CD. Again, it was like, why not? There must have been a Mega CD on that. Well, I guess you didn't have the Mega Drive, so why would you call it the Mega CD? That would just be confusing.
For us, here in America, it was very like Sega. The name Sega had to be front and center because I mean Nintendo. Also going back to your book, you have a really nice blurb about the crash of '83, which of course Nintendo came out with the NES or the Famicom in Japan. That essentially saved. That gray toaster box, which I still have, it's in my drawer. I'm not going to pull it out because that's buried. That gray toaster saved home consoles here in the United States. So, of course, when Sega wanted a piece of the pie, they really had to differentiate themselves because one of the things that the crash that attributed to the crash were, and I had to mix, and I had gone through this experience with my own parents and my grandparents, that I had to tell them exactly what system the game I needed or what system of the game I wanted. Because if you look at the late 80s or the very early 80s, like the Atari games and then television games, the Coleco games, a lot of them don't have what system they're for on the box. So if you say, hey, so like you get this little kid who's like, hey, I want the Cabbage Patch Kids game. And then they come home, they open up Christmas, and they realize, oh, this is the ColecoVision. I need the Intellivision version. And there's nothing on the box that says, or at least if it's on the box, it's in really, really small print.
Yeah.
So for here in the States, I think that one of the things why it's like the Sega CD or the Sega Genesis is like you had to say, it's like, I want the Sega version. So then parents will know which one to get for their kids. And of course, you open up, it's like, because I can only imagine how mad a kid is if like he wants the the Sega Genesis version of Mortal Kombat, but then his parents give him the Super Nintendo version, and it's like, I have a Sega, doesn't say Sega on the box, mom and dad.
Oh, they'll try and make it fit in. It'll be fine. You know, it's a censored one. Just file off the edge a little bit. But no, I totally get that, and you know that you're right to talk about. You know, that was another thing that Nintendo got very, very right. They realized that, you know, marketing the NES as you know a games console explicitly was not going to get retailers to go for it. So that's why you got it. You know, they renamed it the various, you know, the control deck and the game pack, wasn't it? And they poor Rob, God rest his soul, you know, coming out with the NES and you know with his two little games that were totally useless. But you know, it helped them see it differently, and yeah, absolutely got them off the ground. I mean, you know, you compare even the look of the NES. So like, I'm quite, you know, generally quite down on American redesigns of the Japanese products. You know, TurboGrafx and SNES being two of them, but that NES is iconic. And if you could look back at the Famicom, you know, the Famicom design in Japan, like that looks like a games console. Right? That's a games console. And the NES looks like something that just sits next to your VCR and is a piece of like it's a family, well, you know, a family entertainment product. And that added with the, you know, the kind of Nintendo seal of approval, you know, it kind of gave that feeling of, I don't know, like it wasn't like, because, you know, I was going to say Peggy's in this country. What's it called in America? Your ratings board.
The ESRB.
ESRB. So that wasn't really wasn't a thing just then. Obviously, Mortal Kombat hadn't happened, and Night Trap and all the rest of it. Yeah. But I think having that seal, kind of like when you went to a video shop and you saw, you know, there's a certificate that's been approved, that's verified. It was almost like, I know that it was Nintendo marking its own homework, effectively, just going, yeah, that's our game. But you know, I think it genuinely helped, and of course, you know, there was various problems with companies like Tengen producing its own version of games, and you know, EA did it with Sega and all the rest of it. But you know, for a while there, it was, I think it's really helped parents to understand what the hell was going on, because it was the Wild West for a bit there.
It was
although I kind of, I don't know, I was gonna say I kind of miss it. Obviously, I was too young even then to appreciate it. Like I was well, I was born in 1980, so no idea of that going on. Didn't really know Nintendo or Sega till into the late 80s. But I kind of liked it when games companies just go a bit bananas and do a bit too much and don't play safe, which is why the Switch is great, right? The Switch is not playing safe and it blows up and it works. You know, the way that all these companies are piling on each other, like going for these different slices of the same pie, is just a bit more exciting than like, well, here's Sony and Xbox, like, you know, in a standoff to see who'll blink first. Like, that's actually really boring. Just show me the thing and what it does and why I need it. And you know, we're all adults. Well, you know, obviously kids want these things as well. But you know, these are high price products, as they were then, as they were in the 80s. You know, you forget about what games cost. Like we're having this debate now about, you know, our games worth $70 or £70. And I'm like, when Street Fighter 2 came out on the SNES, that was £70. When Turok Dinosaur Hunter came out on the N64, that was like $79.99 or something, $69.99. It's not a new concept to charge that much money for games. And if I go back and look at what I was buying on the Mega Drive for like £40-50 sometimes, you know, Street Fighter flashback games like that, you know, convert that to modern money, it is £78. You know, I don't know. I think we got a bit safe with what we were spending for a while there, and you know, it's probably about time gaming went, you know what, we're losing a lot of money here. Can you? Well, you know, some of the publishers are anyway.
I mean, for me, it was definitely an eye opener, because when I grew up in the era, like when I really started getting into video games and my parents were buying myself and my younger brother games and game systems, it was at the very tail end of the PlayStation and the N64. But and at the time, we thought $100 for a game console, that's really expensive. And then we look at the games, like when we were at Target or at Toys R Us, and the games like the PlayStation games were like $40, give or take here and there. And we thought, okay, that's how much the game costs. And I'm watching these documentaries. I'm looking up stuff to. I'm just looking up video game stuff and saying, yeah, the PlayStation when it first came out in '94 was $300, and the Sega Saturn was $400. Like when I heard about the Xbox 360, that was going to be a $400 system. I thought, good God, that's expensive. But then I look back at the time machine, especially when you adjust for inflation. A PlayStation when you adjust for inflation here in 2021, like $300 is like 600 nowadays, give or take a few hundred maybe. But it is like, damn, games were always expensive. I was just in like this little protective bubble of being an innocent child.
Yeah, these things are not cheap, and they shouldn't be cheap. I attended. I used to attend every year while like you say in the before times, a conference where I live in Brighton called Develop, and there was a guy there called Mike Rose doing a panel one time, and he was just talking specifically about indie games. He works in publishing as well. I want to say his company's called No More Robots, but I've probably got that wrong. But if it is right, that's what it is. But he was saying about about all the indie games that come out, and we've got this in our heads, like, oh, I don't want to pay like £20 for an indie game, or what is an indie game? And like indie publishers are totally undercharging. Like they should be charging more because of the costs, that goes into making these things, which is why it kind of pleases me, I guess. Like Hades came out last year, right? And that's just got a physical Switch release, and that's selling for about £30 here. Yeah, no, so it's selling for about £30.
Yeah, for here in the States, the physical copy of Hades is like $34. Yeah, and I want to say the digital copy was $25. But when I heard that Hades, I'm a big proponent of physical games. I love having my games physical. There are a few games I do have that are digital only, and I missed out because I don't know if you're aware of it, but limited run games. They put out stuff physical, like Panzer Paladin was one of my favorite games of last year. They did a limited run of Panzer Paladin, but I missed the window. So now that physical copy, when it does eventually come out, is going to be like the price is going to be jacked up.
Yeah,
like Hades, I'm like, I got a physical copy of Hades, which means now it's like this is never going to go anywhere. This is mine.
Yeah, I saw Limited Run talking about the PlayStation store closure thing. And about the importance of preserving things, and then people were like in the comments going like, guys, you deliberately restrict the amount of copies you produce, so it's a little bit like pot kettle black here a little bit, but nice try. But you are right, like I mean I do like getting the physical things sometimes, like that Mario 3D All-Stars set. Like, okay, I'm a sucker. I went and bought that as a physical thing, because even though I already had it digitally, I was just like, I just want that box over there. I'm that sad and boring that I'm going to have that. And I do it every now and again. Like when we got to the changeover to PlayStation 5, I looked at what I had on PS4 digital. That, like some of the big games of the generation, right? So Spider-Man, God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2 and stuff that I only had digitally. And, those games, unlike what we're talking about, they're still quite cheap. So I just, went and got them, so they're there now. They're on the shelf. So if I ever need to revisit them, I don't have to mess around with whether or not a shop exists anymore. I say hopefully I can still play them. I assume they'll play fine without a dozen updates or something. But who knows? That's something that old games certainly didn't have to worry about. Is I'm going to sit down and play this game. No, I'm not. I'm going to wait 7 hours for a download. That kind of stuff. I definitely. Don't enjoy of the modern gaming experience.
I can definitely tell you that there have been a few times where, because my friends on the podcast, Sparks and Ryan, they recently just got me into Fortnite. I used to be 100% anti-Fortnite, but after playing with my friends, I'm like, okay, this game's actually kind of fun. I'm really enjoying it. There are like 3 out of 5 times I've been trying to play this game, it has a huge update. And I have good internet here at my house. I have some pretty decent internet, but there are times where it takes quite a while for it to download and then to copy it. So my friends are playing and I'm just on my phone scrolling through Twitter, look on my headset, just looking up. It's like, okay, I'm at X% now. And I'm just like waiting. And when it finally does finish, like 45 minutes later, I could find like, cool. And we only get like 20 minutes of playtime because they've been playing for X amount of hours and they need to go to sleep. And I just got to work because I have really bad work hours. I come home at 1 o'clock in the morning. So for me, it's like, staying up till like 4 in the morning, no problem for me.
Yeah.
For them, problem.
Yeah, it's not so good. I started. Well, I say started. I put the disc in
Hmm.
for Watchdog Legion. I want to say on Wednesday, and I played it on Friday. That's the level we're at. Sometimes I don't like leave my Xbox running all the time, so I had to
Yeah.
put it on, and I'll just give this a little play. Oh, it needs a 20 gig update. Oh, now the Xbox needs an update, and like it's fine. It's what we deal with, but yeah, they're kind of like that. That's why it's so great just to go back to something a little bit more old school sometimes. And it's like,
Mhm.
here's the game. I plug it in, I turn the power on, and it works.
Yeah.
And it's still a lot of that stuff still works. The original Game Boy is so great for this.
Oh,
I'm sure those Game Boys were designed to, like, when the apocalypse happened, it won't just be cockroaches that are left. There'll be like all those old DMG Game Boys lying around, still playing Tetris.
well,
But
that they're so over in Nintendo World in New York City. I actually saw this when I went to visit New York way back in 2008. They have a Game Boy which survived a bombing in the Gulf War, and it still plays. Like the shell is burnt and melted, but the screen is perfectly fine, and it's still playing Tetris.
I've been to see it myself. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
whenever I went to New York, um, for a few years, I was back and forth semi regularly, and
Mhm.
yeah, I'd quite often pop in there, and ostensibly because I'm going to go buy my kids a gift, I'll buy them a little link, or I'll buy them a t-shirt or whatever. But yeah, like always, the last time I was there would have been about 2017, maybe 2017, and they changed the layout on that top floor there. I
Yeah.
realized that most people now are just like, what the hell are you talking about? The Nintendo shop in New York. But yeah, it had a lot more of a museum vibe about it, with like the kind of the history of all the consoles and stuff, and it had those E3 puppets of the Nintendo stuff were there as well.
Oh, yeah.
They'd done the kind of like the Muppet style Shigeru Miyamoto and people, so that was quite cool. Yeah. But haven't been since when. I don't want to get into politics, but when did Trump come in? Was that late 2016,
He was
2017?
elected. He was elected in 2016, officially sworn into
Okay.
office January 2017.
So I was last in New York 2016 then, because that's when
Okay.
I was last over there. Yeah, it wasn't like an I'm not coming because Trump thing. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just coincidental.
But
Um,
you have other stuff going on.
we have our own problems here. I can assure you of
I
that.
I am aware.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a bleak timeline. But anyway, games are good. That's what keeps
Games
us
are
going.
good. Yes.
Games are pretty good. Yeah, we like those things.
Yes.
But
I know you said when we put this up, said like we'll talk for an hour. Now it's like an hour 30 minutes. Do you need to go, or do you
yeah,
want to?
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, we should probably like wrap up quite soon. If that's quite okay. But if you've got any like burning questions or anything, you
Not
fancy
not
fire
burning
away.
questions. Not burning questions, because I was like I said, I was working on this at 4 o'clock in the morning. This morning, I only got like 5 hours of sleep because I was like, what can I ask him? And I only asked like three of the questions I have for you, but that is totally fine. This show is like I said earlier, we sit down, we just
Mhm.
talk, we rant, and it was a great conversation. And you, good sir, have an open invite. If you just want to come back and just like shoot the shit for a bit, just let me know. We'll bring you on. I'll tell the guys. We'll just like we'll talk. We'll just like throw a dart at the board and see what we just talk about video games. That's why I love doing the show. So thank you so much, Mike, for coming on and for answering me back. And the book, hold up, let me get a better picture. Let me get this for the video. The book is Retro Gaming, a bite-sized history of video games. I was lucky enough to find it at Barnes & Noble. I'm pretty sure you can find it pretty much anywhere books are sold. At least I hope you can, because it's this came from I don't know if this is offensive. I apologize if it is. This came from jolly old England. So here you go.
It did. That's where it began. But it's traveled well. I've actually got. I'll show you this. Like,
Ooh,
this is a rare thing that happens in publishing for me anyway, for gaming books.
huh.
But it's also in Spanish and French. Look at that.
Oh, look at that. That's awesome.
There you go. So if you're in Spain or France, you
There
can
you
buy the book there as well. But yeah, the publisher exported it to
Yeah.
America, and I'm pleased it found its way there. It helps that it isn't especially topical. It should mean that the bookshops keep on stocking it. As like,
Mhm.
even if there's one hidden in the back somewhere. But I'll tell you what, Ben, if you ever get around to doing your own book, that feeling of walking into a bookshop or anywhere and like seeing
Mhm.
your own book on the shelf is like take having something published on the internet and magnify that by like 1,000,
Oh,
and then you feel like really weird and really, you're sure everyone's staring at you because you've just had a moment looking at just a stack of books.
It's funny enough,
But
a book project came into my head while I was at my 9 to 5 job the other day, and I thought to myself, I was like, that actually could be a pretty good idea, pretty good thing to work on. And I always told myself, if I ever see, because I have like 5 other different projects that are like in my backlog staring at me like, when you go work on us, Ben? But I always thought to myself, if I ever see a book that I wrote or I worked on in a store, I'm going to ask the store managers like, hey, I wrote that. Can I sign it? Just like quick signature and just put it back on the shelf and walk out.
Leave a little note inside. Yeah. I did that on one of our local bookshops in Brighton asked me to do that, so I did it for a couple. I have no idea if they ever sold them, but if anyone bought it from there, they'd have got a little note in there. I did it at a night Sega put on once as well, or a Sega related thing, and that was really weird because they asked me to write a little note. I'm like, I don't know what to write. Like, thanks, I guess.
Like, thanks for buying my book.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks very much. Except at that night they were giving them away, so I didn't even get anything. I mean, oh my god. At least you bought it on discount.
For me, there's like a membership program at my store. So for me, it was like, yeah, sure, because I was already buying that. And that was like $40. And I was like, look at this too. And then turns out I actually read this. I haven't even cracked that one open.
Well, you see, that's the only recommendation I need to hear. That's all I need to hear.
Yeah, I'm just bummed that you're not just a continent, but you're also an ocean away, because I was hoping you would sign this, but maybe someday. Who knows?
I'll send you a virtual signature. You can 3D print it and put it. I don't even know how the internet really works, Ben. I'm just bluffing it as I go.
Just print it out and tape it in my cover.
Someone did actually ask me to do that though. They did ask me to send a signed copy, and thankfully I had a spare and I did send it. But it was very, very odd to be asked. It's very, very odd. But look, I mean, thanks for this chat. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for the support. Thanks you for tweeting about the book and everything. And it's really great as well to see someone who's a bit younger than me. I mean, I'm certainly not the oldest in this business. I'm just over 40, but people who are discovering the history a little bit, because I think it's important. The book is very much if you were there, it's more that kind of thing. It's not the deep history, it's not the deep dive, but I think if you want to really understand how we got to where we are, you have to do a little bit of fun homework, and the best thing to do is go and play the games, right? Like, books are fun. Go and play the games. Like, if you listen to this and you're like, oh, I want to read about Zelda, I want to read about Mario, just go and play them. Go and play the games. You'll learn a lot more than people like me could ever write. So that's it.
Although, not to say reading is not fun, it totally is. I love reading about this stuff. That's why I keep going back to it. But then it's like, I read it, I was like, man, I gotta play some more games.
It's a complementary medium. Absolutely. But thanks for having me on, man.
Of course. And where can people find you on the internet besides reading your awesome book? Where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, you won't find me on the internet in the pages of that book. I'm on Twitter. I'm just at Mike Diver, so you can find me there. That's about it, really.
That's pretty much how I found you.
I'm a oversharer on Twitter, if anything. So apologies in advance. If anyone follows me expecting just video games, they'll just get a load of politics and football as well. I'm sorry about that in advance.
Who's your club in England?
Oh, Southampton Football Club. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. We are in the Premier League, but it's fine. I don't suppose most of America would have any idea who we are.
I'm somewhat aware of English football. The only 2 teams I know of are Manchester United, because that's the most popular football team in the entire world, and Liverpool.
And they are the champions, the Premiership champions, who we beat this season. So that automatically makes us the best team, right? Although Manchester United did also beat us 9-0. So we beat the champions and we lost 9-0 to Manchester United. That's the kind of season Southampton have had this year. A bit topsy-turvy.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, internationally, I'm a huge Brazil fan. But that's when we talk about the FIFA World Cup. That's a whole different story. But I assume if I ever do go to England, whatever city I end up in, or if I go to visit you in your city, it'll be like, hey, this is your favorite football team now. I'm like, sure. I don't want to get yelled at.
It's no, I think you can safely walk around in a Brazil shirt everywhere. Even if England are on the TV, Brazil gets a free pass anywhere a Brazilian fan goes.
Of course, if I wear a United States club shirt, people will be like, "Ha, you suck."
Well, I don't think we'd know what most of them are. Like one of my I realized waffling a little bit, but one of my old friends from before I worked in music, before I worked in games, I worked in music, and he moved to LA, so like he follows like LA Galaxy and stuff now, and it's a whole different world, but it's kind of cool within itself. Like it feels like America's got soccer now well.
It's growing. I mean, thankfully, because the success of the women's national team, because they won like 4 World Cups.
All the World Cups, everyone.
Yeah, because I was talking about wearing like a United States national team in England, and then I'm probably getting yelled at.
I think you'd be fine. Yeah. I mean, you know, a German top maybe. There's a bit of history there. Some people don't like to let it go, but America generally, I think we'd be fine. So, you know, the whole War of Independence was a long time ago.
I can only imagine the conversation between someone wearing a German national jersey and an English/American. There's going to be a little bit more conversation than what happened on the pitch and also what happened in the 1940s.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Yeah,
we'll leave it there. Anyways, thank you once again for coming on the show. I really open invite. If you ever want to come on, just hit me up. Retro game. Let me hold up one more time, audio listeners. It is called Retro Gaming: A Byte-Sized History of Video Games, and the word byte is spelled B-Y-T-E, kind of like megabyte. Which I saw that, I'm like, well, that's a great little pun right there.
That's the reason for picking it up. That's why you did it.
So for now, once again, thank you for coming on. Now let us unpause and get back to our video games.